Now awaiting a chance to claim asylum, with more arriving by the day. Senator Ron Johnson last hour here in America's Newsroom said this.
The president certainly deserves to have better barriers funded. We have to recognize the fact that what we're seeing at the border right now is just a culmination of bad policy, loopholes, bad legal precedent that is incentivizing and rewarding people to come in this country illegally.
So from Washington down to the border, Tijuana, there is Griff Jenkins live again on the Mexico side of the border. Griff, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. You know, you mentioned new arrivals. Let me show you here at the sports complex in Tijuana, just up by those gates up there, about 4:30 this morning. Take a look at this video. This is 57 new migrants arriving this overcrowded shelter, and we're getting new numbers from the Tijuana municipal government. They tell us that 6,062 total are here in the sports complex. I guess if you had the 57, that's 6,119. But they break it down into 3,877 are men, 1,127 are women, and 1,058 are children. Now, that 6,000 plus does not include the 2,000 believed to be about 2 hours away in Mexicali. Many of them, they believe, may try and come here, and there is no space for them. They're tired, they're restless, they're frustrated here, and they're pretty much disappointed that it's not as easy to get into the U.S. as they once thought. We spoke with the delegate running this area, Gennaro Moreno, and he says that he blames the organizers for perhaps giving them a false hope that it was going to be easy to get into the U.S. to cross, because it's costing the Tijuana government here $30,000 to $40,000 a day to run it, and that comes straight out of municipal funds, which means ultimately they could be forced to even raise taxes here in Tijuana. Bill?
Thank you, Griff. Griff Jenkins live there in Mexico.
All right, well, in 1 hour, Secretary Madison Pompeo will be speaking at that Senate briefing. The killing of Jamal Khashoggi is expected to be one of the big topics covered during that closed-door meeting. But several lawmakers are wondering why the CIA director, Gina Haspel, will not be there. Rich Edson's live at the State Department with more on this. Rich.
Hey, good morning, Sandra. And according to a number of the senators, they say they requested that Haspel be there, but that the White House did not send her to that briefing. They'd like to hear from her. This is also as the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, ahead of this meeting, is defending the U.S.-Saudi relationship. He's writing in the Wall Street Journal, says, quote, "The October murder of Saudi national Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey has heightened the Capitol Hill caterwauling and media pile-on, but degrading U.S.-Saudi ties would be a grave mistake for the national security of the U.S. and its allies." He says the U.S. does not condone Khashoggi's murder, and that the Trump administration will consider additional punishment against the Saudis if more facts about Khashoggi's murder surface. Though even top Republicans are urging the U.S. to go further. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell calls Khashoggi's murder completely abhorrent and says that some kind of response is in order, as some congressional Democrats and Republicans are calling for more sanctions, even supporting a resolution that would end U.S. military support for the Saudi coalition in its war in Yemen. Sandra.
Rich, President Trump is now threatening to cancel this meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the G20 following that clash between Russia and Ukraine. What are you hearing more on this?
Well, in the Washington Post, the president says that he's still waiting for a full report from his national security team on this incident where Russia attacked a couple of ships, 3 ships. Ukrainian ships seized them and their crews. The president says that the report will be very determinative and that maybe he won't have the meeting with Putin at the G20 this week. Well, now the Kremlin, according to Russian state media, is saying that they are aware of that interview the president conducted in the Washington Post, but that they are still planning and moving ahead with that meeting, that they haven't been notified that it's off. Sandra?
Rich Edson at the State Department. Thank you, Rich.
So meanwhile, President Trump and the Republican Party pulling off another victory late last night, picking up a 53rd Senate seat from Mississippi. Cindy Hyde-Smith wins the runoff against the Democrat Mike Espy. I want to bring in America's A-team right now. Brad Blakeman, former Deputy Assistant President George W. Bush. Welcome back, Brad. Jessica Tarloff, Fox News contributor. Nice to see you. And Mary Anastasia O'Grady from the Wall Street Journal, also a Fox News contributor. And welcome here.
Welcome.
Hope you survive these two, because they're killers over here. You're at 53 right now in the Senate. Feel pretty good about that, I'd imagine. Does it change much?
Not now. I think that, if anything, it gives a real division to what's going to happen next year. Either there's going to be gridlock, hopeless gridlock, or there's going to be some deal making. Democrats should take the advantage of a transactional president and make deals.
Wow. Okay. Will you take that, Jess?
I hope so. I mean, that's been the big conversation. People have been pitting it as, you know, are you going to legislate or investigate? I say we can do both. He is a transactional president. We've seen that already with Chuck Schumer saying, oh, maybe we can find $1.6 billion for your border security. I think Democrats will seize upon it. And 53, I'm not sure how different it is from 51. When you look at the makeup of the Senate, you know, Mitt Romney might be the new Jeff Flake in terms of wavering on the more conservative issues. And we'll...
Okay, it's a perfect setup for Mary to be the arbiter on what can get done.
Well, let's not overstate, first of all, this victory. I mean, this is Mississippi, and it only turned into a runoff because there was a spoiler in the original, in the first election. This is a Republican state. And I think that, you know, the fact that they won is, okay, it's helpful, but they already had the majority. I don't think it changes things that much. I also don't think it says that much about President Trump's ability in this round. I mean, it's not like he, you know, pulled off a very narrow victory. In fact, if you look at what happened in Florida, I think it's very worrisome when looking forward to 2020. Why was the Florida race so tight when that was for a long time?
I just wonder if there's a bargain to be made here. Okay, we'll wait on that. Topic 2.
Meanwhile, there is a lot of questions about what the president is willing to do over a government shutdown, over funding for his border wall. As we continue to see this immigration debate continue, Republicans just kicked off their first press conference since their return from the holidays. So we'll see what comes out of that. Meanwhile, the president gave this exclusive interview to Politico and said this: I do not do anything just for political gain. The president said he would totally be willing to shut down the government over border wall funding if Democrats don't budge. Do you support that sort of, I guess, rhetoric on the potential shutdown from the president?
I do. I think the president's got to use leverage. We're seeing a crisis play out right before our eyes. The things that we're seeing on the border now happen every day. They're just not covered. But the kind of invasion that, and it's a proper word, it is an invasion of people who are seeking to break our laws to get the benefits of our laws.
Pause on that because it's a perfect setup for what's happening on the Hill. Roll it, guys. Paul Ryan's taking questions on this topic, the border wall.
The House has the president's $5 billion in the wall, and the House, obviously, you know, the House is there. We've never been the issue here. Our bill contains the president's full request for the border. But ultimately, the president and the Senate Democrats are going to have to come to agreement as well. As you know, this takes 60 votes in the Senate. Therefore, Senate Democrats have a say-so in appropriation matters. And so I think what we're going to have to do is just sort all of this out between all the parties that are involved.
So if they come to an agreement,
I'm not going to negotiate through the press. That's a foolish thing to do. But what we'll have to do is come together. I think hopefully after like Kevin said, hopefully after the election, Democrats realize a secure border should not be a Republican thing. It shouldn't be a Democrat thing. It's just good for the country to actually secure our border. The House is there. We hope the Senate comes with us. Yeah.
Should Congress pursue any kind of formal sanction of Saudi Arabia for the killing of Khashoggi or for its actions in Yemen?
Look, well, I won't get into the Yemen issue, only to say that Iran bears a lot of responsibility, and it's in our national security interest to contain Iran and their proxy wars and their pursuit of nuclear weapons. With the Khashoggi case, it's very important, I think, that we speak with moral clarity. Realpolitik is very important, but realpolitik works if you do so from a position of moral clarity. And with respect to holding people accountable, we need to do that. I'm not going to get into the classified briefings that we've received. We have actually requested from the administration to come and give a briefing to all members of Congress. So I'm hoping that we can get the administration to come here in the next week or two to brief members on what our intelligence community knows about this case. That means there's more to find out and there's more to do on that. And I'll leave it at that.
Do you mean that the president needs
I think for our national security, we always need to stand up for our values. We always need to stand up for our interests. And when you're practicing realpolitik, you also have to stand up for American interests, and those two do not necessarily have to collide with one another.
Just following up on the wall question, Mr. Speaker, based on your meeting with the president yesterday, it sounds like he is very firm on the $5 billion, which I understand you guys have. could you just provide us any suggestion of how you bridge the gap between the 1.6?
Again, I just don't think it's in our interest to be negotiating through the media. We're talking with Homeland Security, we're talking with OMB on what kind of resources they need to do what they need to do. And that also means that our appropriators have to sort this out with themselves and the White House along with the Senate, which is clearly the obstacle here because they take a 60-vote threshold.
Last question, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Not on inside negotiations here, but looking further out.
You think I'm going to do that, don't you?
Why not just approve a CR into next year and make this wall issue Democrats' problem if they can't agree with it?
Because we still want to solve problems. We're elected to work for our constituents. We're elected to solve problems. And look, turn on the TV. You can see we have a problem at the border. So we want to secure our border. The House Republicans have always wanted to secure the border. The House Republicans have been passing bills to secure our border. And I'd like to think that Democrats would also want to join us in securing the border, especially after the election.
Well, there it is. One of the rare times we've heard from Paul Ryan, really, since the midterms of 2.5 weeks ago, back with our panel, Brad, Jessica, and Mary. I think it's very interesting now about this border issue here. Do we think that there can be a deal between Chuck Schumer, because they had a deal about a year ago and he walked away from it? Can that come back?
There were aspects of that deal that were not palatable to Democrats, and that's why it was walked away from. It had a lot more contingencies on it than just the funding. The $1.6 billion that Chuck Schumer is proposing has divided Democrats because some people see it as a concession to the president on his wall, but Chuck Schumer's made it clear this is about border security, and Mary and I were just whispering during the break, there's a difference between a border wall and border security. Democrats would be smart to be for border security, and 1.6 is not the $5 billion that Trump wants, and it's certainly not the $25 billion that he started out by asking for. So I think it's a very shrewd political move on Chuck Schumer's part to be giving the 1.6 and seeing what the president does with it.
Mary?
Well, I think that you have to keep in mind that this is a good issue for both the Democrats and the Republicans in 2020 and in 2020, and that's why it's not being solved, because they don't actually want it solved. And I think that, you know, whether or not you have a wall or, I mean, I agree that there's a difference between building a wall that sounds very much like the Berlin Wall and something that would enhance security. And I think people are happy with security, but that's not what is at issue here. What at issue here is the Democrats basically looking to their constituents who are going to vote for them, they're going to riled up come 2020, they want them on their side. And if this problem is solved, if DACA is solved and the wall problem is solved, it's not an issue for them in 2020. I don't think they want it solved.
Well, every time you hear the president speak on this, he says Democrats want open borders. What you just heard from Paul Ryan a few moments ago, this shouldn't be a Republican thing. This shouldn't be a Democrat thing. This should be all Americans wanting border security. So how do both parties play this?
It's semantics. They say border security, we say a wall. Listen to what Paul Ryan said. He said, we're going to OMB and we're going to find out from Homeland what they need. Sounds to me incremental. Incremental spending on the wall as needed. I think that's a win for both sides. If you look at it that way, I think a deal can be made. Certainly there's not going to be an omnibus bill for $26 billion for a 3,000-mile wall. But incremental spending, spend as you go for what you need. I think the deal.
My sense is the president is winning on this, piece by piece as he goes. Quickly,
but the president even suggested that in his Washington Post interview, where he said, "Well, maybe if we don't get a wall, maybe there's a plan B." And he talked about razor wire, and there's different ways to enhance border security without building.
But we know the breach that happened a week ago, where all this attention has gone to the tear gas, et cetera, happened because there was a point in the wall that was weakest, and those who wanted to get in without filing for asylum knew that. Lindsey Graham talked about that and talked about a double standard right now that's being portrayed in the media. Here was his reaction. Watch.
When it comes to Obama, when he uses tear gas, he's protecting the country. The narrative is that Trump is a cruel, heartless bastard. Only works if he uses tear gas on kids, and it undercuts the argument if the Obama administration used tear gas to protect our border from being overrun. I stand behind the men and women on the border, standing between us and people who want to cross illegally.
I mean, you're a Border Patrol agent. You don't know what's coming on the other side of the border.
Absolutely.
And tear gas is non-lethal. Yeah, women and children involved. We'd never like to see this, okay? It's ugly. But what do you do when you're a Border Patrol agent? And that's your job.
You uphold the law. You do your duty. And it's a shame that parents are putting their children in this position. but the laws have to be upheld. And it's unfortunate, but it's avoidable. They shouldn't be here.
But I think there's also, I mean, Lindsey Graham is complaining about the double standard, but what feeds into that double standard is the way the president has talked about immigrants since he was in his initial campaign. So he has a reputation for basically defending the anti-immigrant stance of the Republican Party.
I understand that. I mean, there's an issue here with what happened with the rock throwing, that a few rogue people ruin this for thousands of people who are coming here with legitimate claims. We know that asylum seeking is their legal right, and they can come and do that. And to Mary's point, to add on to that, not just the rhetoric that started when he came down that golden escalator to announce his candidacy, but the child separation policy. And there's just a lawsuit filed today, $60 million lawsuit against government agencies because of a child who was in ICE care in a detention center in Texas and who passed away from respiratory failure just a couple months after that. That mother is suing the government.
What are you saying?
I'm saying
that was their fault?
I'm saying that there are lawsuits now against the government for things that occurred because of Trump's child separation policy, which was not what President Obama was doing. It is not just rhetoric, it is action that he has taken
to that
against
President
illegal
Obama did was the use of tear gas. It's been used 126 times since 2010.
Obama separated families the same as me. That's absolutely not true. It was not a zero-tolerance policy under the Obama administration. It was not the same policy.
In the early years of the Trump administration, he even talked, you said illegal immigration. He's even talked about we have too much legal immigration, that he didn't want anyone coming here taking jobs from Americans, which of course is crazy. Right. Because we need migration.
He campaigned on meritocracy. Right. That's what he was going for.
Eventually he did, but he also talked about cutting down the size of legal immigration. So he has an image.
People should we should only have people in here that we need and that we want. A lot of people want to come here. Need versus want. Big difference.
But we have 7 million open jobs. Are you going to go deliver pizzas? Are you going to work in the fields? This is what people are coming for.
I would do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Thanks. Stand by. Panel 2 coming up.
Thank you. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort once again in hot water as the Mueller investigation saga continues at this hour. Andrew McCarthy is the former assistant U.S. attorney. He will join us and weigh in on all of that just ahead.
Also, GM is in the crosshairs of the West Wing now for its planned cutbacks. How the White House could take action in a moment.
Money want to just hold on to cash, and I think it's a huge business mistake and a huge PR mistake.
Well, the Wall Street Journal opinion page is weighing in on what they're saying is Trump's GM collision. They write this morning, Mr. Trump thinks his trade machinations can overrule, reading machines here, can overrule the realities of the marketplace. But he's as wrong as Barack Obama, they say. It was about the climate and regulation. Fine with us if he wants to end subsidies for all car companies. But if he intervenes to make GM less competitive, Mr. Trump will merely hurt more workers. Isn't that a fair point to be making, Charles?
Sure, it's a fair point to be making. I don't know that he's intervening. I don't think that President Trump is asking them to sell cars that nobody's going to buy. I think he's asking them, A, be honest, and B, hey, there are vehicles out there we're buying. Again, they just had a record quarter last quarter. They set an all-time record for General Motors on average selling price, even as volumes went down, because they made up those car volumes on things that we were willing to pay big money for. By the way, GM shouldn't also forget that little tax benefit from the Trump tax plan. In that same period, net income was $2.5 billion. A year earlier, a loss of $3 billion. A year ago, they paid $2.3 billion in taxes. This year, $100 million. So, give and take a little bit here.
Okay, now, China Terrace, go back to Kudlow. He was in the briefing room yesterday. Here is Larry Kudlow talking about the current state of affairs.
Charles Payne is fired up.
Yes, I like when the volume goes high. Here's Kudlow.
Most observers believe China to be in a slump, whereas the United States is in a very strong, solid position going into this summit. However, again, to repeat, the president said there is a good possibility that we can make a deal, and he is open to it.
So I don't know if they get a deal or not, but here's what I think the White House is not doing correctly. They're not selling this story well enough.
I agree.
They're trying to do generational change for China and for U.S. trade policy.
I don't disagree with that. I think you're right. I think they should have. I think at the very beginning, President Trump should have went on national television and say, listen, we're going to try to right a wrong that's been permeating for about 3 decades, maybe 4. It's not going to perhaps happen overnight. I was at an event last night with American farmers. And I got to tell you something, they're hurting. And by the way, the money that the Trump administration gave them was just a pittance. It didn't.
But they have to keep people on board. And
right, but this is my point, though. My point is, like, for instance, when people say, well, if we give farmers money, it's like welfare. I always tell people, you know what? If my house is on fire and the fire department puts it out, that's not welfare. If someone is mugging you in a parking lot and the police arrest that person, it's not welfare. China is mugging. They're mugging American farmers. They're deliberately targeting them. America needs to, we need to rally around them.
Can the White House win on this?
Of course they can win on this. We are going to win this. The problem, though, is two things. What is victory in the eyes of President Trump? And articulating a message that, hey, this is a country that bought so much war bonds that we were able to win World War II. People didn't buy them because they thought they were going to make money on them. They did it because they thought it was the patriotic thing to do.
Love that.
Yeah.
There was some that viewers didn't see there when you were getting all wrought up. The glasses coming on. I get tweets after Charles Payne segments about the glasses are coming on. Thank you, Charles.
See you guys later.
So the White House now pushing back against the claims the president will try to fire Bob Mueller. Have a listen.
Look, I think that the president has had Robert Mueller doing his job for the last 2 years, and he could have taken action at any point, and he hasn't. So we'll let that speak for itself. He has no intent to do anything.
So that comment as we learn a new twist in the Russia investigation, Smitty, coming up.
Meanwhile, Ivanka Trump says it is time for the special counsel to wrap things up. Former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy will join us live next.
In the spotlight, new reports suggest that the Manafort legal team has been sharing information with the president's lawyers. That's not illegal, but it is interesting. Team Fox coverage, former federal prosecutor Andy McCarthy has analysis on that. But first, Catherine Herridge live in Washington with the story. Hey, Catherine, good morning.
Well, thank you, Bill, and good morning. Lawyers for President Trump and Paul Manafort have what's called a joint defense agreement, and that allows them to share information. Mueller's investigators, specifically Andrew Weissman, have been pumping Manafort for information about the June 2016 meeting at Trump Tower and whether candidate Trump knew about the meeting with Russians in advance. Fox News has also told that special counsel investigators have pressed Manafort on the role of the president's son-in-law at that meeting, Jared Kushner. At the briefing yesterday, the White House press secretary was asked about Manafort and allegations he met with the head of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, whose website would later release the hacked Clinton campaign emails.
Certainly remain confident in the White House's assertion that the president was involved in no wrongdoing, was not part of any collusion. The things that have to do with Mr. Manafort, I would refer you to his attorneys to address that.
Source close to the Manafort defense team singled out special counsel prosecutor Andrew Weissman, alleging he has crossed the line, pressuring Manafort, in some cases asking the same questions repeatedly, apparently looking for different answers. President's lawyer Rudy Giuliani says the president is upset with how Manafort has been treated, by example, being kept in solitary confinement. It's important to note that the special counsel's office has not been commenting on the play-by-play and the reporting, if you will, but earlier this year, Weissman seemed to step away from the Manafort prosecution in Virginia after confirmation he met with 4 Associated Press reporters in the spring of 2016 over Manafort evidence, Bill.
Thank you, Catherine. Also, we're learning more about the investigation of an associate linked to former campaign aide Roger Stone. His name is Jerome Corsi, and what's he saying?
Well, according to these records obtained by Tucker Carlson tonight, Jerome Corsi is accused of lying to special counsel investigators over his contact with the head of WikiLeaks in the summer of 2016. The records document plea negotiations earlier this month with the special counsel and this longtime associate of Roger Stone, Jerome Corsi. Corsi denies contact with Assange as well as any foreign agents.
Have you ever had contact with Russian intelligence or knowingly subverted the interests of your own country?
Absolutely not. I've been a loyal American. I have no contacts with Russian intelligence. I have no business interests in Russia. I have nothing to do with Russia. I've never been to Russia.
Corsi said the special counsel planned to charge him on an interview and statements he made during that interview that he was later allowed to amend after reviewing old emails. This is a tactic that we've heard from other witnesses alleging this tactic was used against them in the course of their dealings with the special counsel, Bill.
Thank you, Catherine. Catherine Herod sets the table for us in D.C.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Let's go to our headliner now. Andrew McCarthy, former chief assistant U.S. attorney and a Fox News contributor. You were listening to Catherine's report there. Start first with Paul Manafort and where all this goes based on what we're learning today.
Sandra, what I get from all of this, and I'm coming at this as somebody who has known and respected Bob Mueller and a number of the people on his staff who are very able lawyers. So I want to give this thing the benefit of the doubt. They were asked to look at, get to the bottom of what Russia did to interfere with the election, which is a worthy cause. But that's camouflage, it seems to me, for what has become a clown show. I mean, look, let's assume just for the moment on the last thing that Catherine Herridge was talking about, that they got their big wish, right? Jerry Corsi has a contact in WikiLeaks, and he gets information from them. He gives it to Roger Stone, who gives it to President Trump. Let's assume all that happened, even though we don't have facts that establish that. It's not a crime. So what are they doing here? They are investigating the seamy underbelly of politics, the fact that campaigns go out and try to get dirt on the opposition candidate, and they were asking a bunch of people who were involved in it, possibly, a bunch of uncomfortable questions, and they're getting them to lie about it, or else they are lying about it. But the point is, the underlying thing that they're investigating is politics. It's not crime, and it's not a prosecutor's place to do that. So if you had a real case here, you'd have somebody come in and say, I was involved in this enterprise. It was between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. There was a hacking operation. We were going to get these emails. We were going to hold them. And then at the right time, we were going to put them all out. So then you have people in something that's actually a serious federal crime, conspiracy to hack. They don't have that. What they have is somebody has unsavory information about our opponent, and we're going to try to put it out in a time that is maximal as far as the campaign is concerned. How are they investigating that? They're charging people with false statements. You're charging people with false statements because the underlying thing you're investigating is not a crime.
Very interesting. Here's what you write. You say, I do not subscribe to the conventional wisdom that Mueller's final report is imminent, you say. You continue, there are strong signs that the investigation is winding down, but there are still rounds left to be played. We're all playing a guessing game on that. Ivanka Trump was asked about it on ABC earlier today, and this is what she said about the Mueller matter.
I think it should reach its conclusion. I think it's been a long time that this has been ongoing, but I want it to be done in a way in which nobody could question that it was hurried or rushed. And I think after this long period of time, we're well beyond that point. So I think it absolutely should reach its conclusion.
So that's what she said on ABC. The other thing she was asked about in the interview is about defending her use of email when she was making the transition from private life to the White House, et cetera. And here's how she explained that.
There really is no equivalency. All of my emails that relate to any form of government work, which was mainly scheduling and logistics and managing the fact that I have a home life and a work life, are all part of the public record. They're all stored on the White House system. So everything has been preserved, everything's been archived.
Anything wrong there?
Well, look, you're allowed to, if you communicate about government business on your private system or your private email, you shouldn't try to initiate that by sending it. But let's say you get government official business on your email. You need to store that in the government files. If you do that and there's no classified information, it's fine. But when she says there's no equivalency, she's talking about the Hillary Clinton case. And to compare what happened in the Hillary Clinton case to her case is like comparing jaywalking to bank robbery. I mean, with Clinton, you have somebody who set up intentionally an outside the government network to systematically conduct her business in a way that was concealed from government record keeping, and then when she was called on it, she destroyed 30,000 emails, and in the meantime, she's in a high-ranking position where 80% of the work is classified, so that she had to know inevitably by setting up that system that classified information would be coursing through it. I mean, I just don't understand how you possibly compare one thing to the other.
So as we wrap this up, based on everything she just said, assuming that is all true, should this be a non-issue?
Well, it's obviously a political issue. You know, look, Trump made a big deal, as he should have, about Mrs. Clinton's email scandal, and they should have used better judgment. If she was doing stuff on her private email, even if she was keeping it in the government system, legally she's fine. Politically, she's creating an issue, and they're getting a little bruised by it. But I don't think it's a big deal.
Your point is that Hillary Clinton literally took her operation offline, and Ivanka Trump.
She did, and on purpose. Yes, on purpose, and systematically, and Bill, under circumstances where she was running a department and responsible for enforcing the rules that everybody's supposed to do their business on government email.
Oh, nice to have you back with us, Andy. We'll talk to you soon, okay? Andy McCarthy, analysis of all matters legal. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks.
Tensions are escalating between Russia and Ukraine. The U.S. is in the middle of all this. President Trump may cancel his meeting with...
This is a situation where Vladimir Putin, he sees the results of the U.S. elections. He sees the weakened state of Macron and Merkel and of, the British Prime Minister as well. And so he's testing the West. He's going to see how we react. So we must react with real strength and resolve.
We are just moments away now from the all-Senate briefing now with Secretaries Mattis and Pompeo. They're on the Hill. I want to bring back our panel. Brad Blakeman, Jessica Tarloff, Mary Anastasia O'Grady. They've been cooling their heels in the green room. What Pompeo will tell you is that there are some tough hombres in the Middle East, and you're going to have to find a way to work with them. How does that go over with the Saudi Arabia relationship?
There's going to be a price to pay. There has already been a price to pay in the relationship. Irreparable harm has been done, not only between our bilateral relations, but multilaterally with the Saudis. But the president is right. He's pragmatic. He sees the world as it is, not the world he wishes it to be. We have Yemen, we have Syria, we have Iran, we have the greater Middle East. We must have a good relationship with Saudis, and we can't dictate who their leaders are.
What they'll argue is that the Saudis are helping us in Iraq, and they're helping us against Iran. That's the case they'll make in part.
Mary?
Not unlike the immigration problem we were talking about before. It's the way the president presents it. He keeps saying that the reason we should stay close to Saudi Arabia is because we could sell them weapons and we could make a lot of money. That's not the reason. I think Mike Pompeo explained in the Wall Street Journal today what the reason is, which is they are an ally in a very dangerous neighborhood, and we need them for that reason. And we are going to sanction them with respect to this, whatever happened to this journalist. We don't approve of it. We are going to talk against it, et cetera, et cetera. But we're not there because we're there to make money. We're there because they're an ally, and they are part of what we are doing to stabilize and bring democracy.
But the point is you need Saudi Arabia.
Secretaries Mattis and Pompeo are about to brief senators. Gina Haspel will not be there. That obviously would be a key part of all of this.
Absolutely, and it looks weird to people on both sides of the aisle. There was a lot of conversation about that yesterday when the decision got made and why that possibly would be the case. Also, Ambassador Bolton yesterday during the press briefing saying, he didn't listen to the Khashoggi tape because what use would that be because he doesn't speak Arabic. Going back to what Mary was saying about the rhetoric that is coming out around this, with the president still not saying definitively, I know that MBS lied, I trust my CIA more than I trust a rogue prince of the Saudi kingdom. It's all disconcerting. Yes, do we need their allyship for sure? But
yeah, here's the quote from Pompeo, Wall Street Journal op-ed. He wrote this: "Is it any coincidence that the people using the Khashoggi murder as a cudgel against President Trump's Saudi Arabia policy are the same people who supported Barack Obama's rapprochement with Iran, a regime that has killed thousands worldwide, including hundreds of Americans, and brutalizes its own people?" It's like, which side do you choose, Brad?
You choose the side that is going to be in the best interest of the United States, putting America first and our allies. There are tough decisions to be made with people who, a lot of them, don't have our values. If we only dealt with people that have our values, we wouldn't be dealing with very many people. What we need to do is try and use our influence to change these countries for the better. And that's why I think the journalist did not die in vain. I think there are going to be tremendous changes that are going to come from this, that are positive changes, not only in the relationship that we have, but the greater relationship with the Middle East.
Yeah, and I think the president can get support for that, but he needs to speak about it in those terms and not in terms of, but we're going to make money off of these military contracts.
I keep hearing you, it's the way he's saying things and not what he's doing. And, his supporters are the first to say, Mary, it's not about what he says. It's about what he does and the actions that this president takes.
Yes, but the U.S. is taking a leadership role here in terms of values in the region, right? So if he's saying, well, we don't care what people do as long as we can make a lot of money, that's not going to lead. That's fine for his base. You say, you know, his base says, look at what he does. But he's trying to bring other people along, okay? He's leading people. And in that role, he needs to make the argument, the moral leadership argument, not the argument about making money.
And also it signals two other rogue countries that are led by similar characters, as Saudi Arabia and Iran, et cetera, that I'm open for business, quite literally. So if you make a great arms deal with me, if we can, you know, wheel and deal on this, if you take, you know, a Saudi national with a green card into the Turkish consulate and you chop them up with a bone saw, I'm going to look the other way. And that's a terrible message.
No, we haven't looked the other way.
Well, President Trump, you've heard him in those gaggles where he has once again undermined the intelligence community and said, you know, we're not sure. And I know it's uncomfortable because Jared Kushner is besties with MBS.
Intelligence service is not definitive. But it's more likely than not, but it's not definitive.
Pompeo and Matt, quickly, Mary, we got to run.
Okay. For example, if we want to get Angela Merkel helping us to do something to punish Putin, for example, okay? We need to make arguments, moral arguments, not just say we're going to make money off of things.
Point
we want to
taken.
be moral
Pompeo and
leaders.
Mattis coming up at 11 a.m. We're going to watch that. Thank you, Brad.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. So, are you feeling happy? Well, maybe not after that conversation, but if you are, how will you feel tomorrow? There is...
Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof.
Here is the question. Do you want your smartphone to predict your mood? There could soon be an app for that. Carly Shipkus joins us now inside.
What's up, Carly? How are we doing?
So, how are we feeling? Are we feeling
We're
okay?
good.
All
Yeah,
right,
we're
good.
good.
Just making sure. So what do you think?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to explain this a little bit. So for people who suffer from depression or panic attacks, imagine a world where your smartphone can sense that something's wrong and tell you in advance, even before you may experience those symptoms yourself. So an electrical engineer at MIT has partnered with a psychology professor at Harvard. They're working on this technology. They say that you can predict moods and actually prevent any future sad episodes that you may have.
Interesting.
I see the good.
Do we
and
like
bad in
it?
this.
Yeah.
Some red flags here. The first one is I think that most people would agree that we are already too attached to technology. So should we really rely on it for emotional support? Also, what if it's wrong? What if it says, hey, you're about to have a bad day, you're about to have a panic attack, you spend all day worrying about it, and it's never going to happen. So it has to be 100%
Is this like
foolproof.
the modern mood ring? Remember?
Yeah, it might be. If it's blue, if it's purple, you're not feeling too well. That's right. There are some good things about it, though. If you are doing something, it always says after you do this, you start to sense a trend, and it may not make you feel good, and it sends you the alert. You might learn to avoid that sort of behavior so you can learn from this. The biggest red flag that I thought about off the top of my head, though, was what about insurance companies? What if they get this information and then they say, all right, well, maybe we're not going to insure people for
I tell you what, Apple is getting into health more and more every time with each app that they come out with.
It really